Good day, my friends. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion, and today we are entering West Virginia. Daze with Jordan the Lion. It begins right now. We're stopping in Morgantown today. Morgantown, West Virginia. So what the heck brings us to Morgantown? This mural? Nope. But it's a great mural. I have actually wanted to come here for like 2 years, ever since I found out that this was the hometown of one of the greatest comedians of all time, one of the greatest people to ever be on a television screen, a movie screen. I'm talking about Ralph Furley, Barney Fife, the incredible Mr. Limpet, the Apple Dumpling Gang, Ghost and Mr. Chicken, the shakiest gun in the West, the reluctant astronaut, Don Knotts. We are in the hometown of Don Knotts, and they have a statue to him. His mother had a home here. I want to talk about his life here. He was actually born and raised here before he went off to become one of the most famous faces of all time. Not real sure if there's a story behind this wall mural or if it's just depicting town life here, but when Don grew up here, this was a working class town. His parents originally lived on a farm and ran a farm, and his father would supplement the income by also working as a miner. I want to go over and see the statue that they made to Don here. So now we've made our way over to the actual Metropolitan Theater that we were just seeing the mural of. And look at the statue of Don Knotts right there. Let's go over and talk to him. Right here in front of the theater with a star with his likeness. You gotta love that. The one and only star here, showing love to their boy, Don Knotts. Now I love this because Don was just such a lovable person. I actually got to meet him in Los Angeles. There were like 2 instances I had. One was, I think the second year that I was living in Los Angeles, I had met Kevin McCarthy, the actor Kevin McCarthy, and had asked him to let me record him doing some dialogue for my album that I was making. I was making a record album, and he told me to meet him at the Hollywood show, and we would go into a conference room and record the part. And so I did, and when I showed up, Don Knotts was there signing autographs amongst other celebrities, and this guy had a line going all the way out the door. He was by far the biggest draw at that entire convention. Now, I actually got to meet him also at my job. At the time, I worked at Jerry's Famous Deli in Los Angeles. So at the time, he was actually coming in like once or twice, sometimes like 4 or 5 times a week to eat there. And I think the reason was because he was, where our restaurant was located was directly across from Cedars-Sinai Hospital, and there's a lot of doctor offices attached to that, so I'm guessing he was probably having doctor's appointments, because he was also known throughout his entire life to be a hypochondriac. But he used to come in so often that one day I was out shopping and bought a Don Knotts DVD, took it to work the next day, and he came in and he walked in. I said, "Don!" And he smiled and waved and everything, and his wife walked by, and I said, "Do you think he would mind signing my DVD for me?" And she said he would love to, and so he signed it for me. And up here on their plaque it says, "A Morgantown native, began his career performing as a ventriloquist here at the historic Metropolitan Theater. After graduating from Morgantown High School in 1942 and West Virginia University in 1948, his impressive comedic and acting talents led to memorable television and movie roles, including Deputy Barney Fife, Ralph Furley and Three's Company, Henry Limpet and the Incredible Mr. Limpet, Luther Heggs and the Ghost and Mr. Chicken, and Theodore Ogilvy and the Apple Dumpling Gang," which was also a great movie with Tim Conway. Among the many honors Don received during his career were 5 Emmys for his role on The Andy Griffith Show and a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2000. Married 3 times, Don had 2 children, Thomas and Karen, never forgetting his roots Don returned many times to attend high school reunions and visit friends. To commemorate his life and success in making us all laugh, Don Knotts Boulevard was named in his honor in 1998. That's great. This poor guy did not have an easy life. He really did not have, especially young. See, his parents, they already had 3 grown kids when they found out they were pregnant with him. They had been married for 25 years. His mom was 40 years old, and then all of a sudden they find out that they're gonna be new parents. It actually caused his dad to have a mental breakdown, like a total nervous breakdown, and he ended up spending basically the rest of his life laying in bed. So Don's mom ended up having to do laundry and kind of like do odd jobs to help get them by. And since his father was a diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic, he would lay in bed, and the only time he would get out is if he was screaming, or if he would, a couple of times he came running after Don with a knife. Actually, his name was Jesse Donald Knotts, and he would always go by Don or Donnie. You know, it's sad, he really didn't have much of a father, not really his father's fault, but his brother, he had 3 brothers. His middle brother actually would kind of fill in for that and kind of help be his father figure. His brother's name was Shadow. And Don would always really keep to himself when he was young because he was just terrified of his father and everything. But his father ended up passing away in 1937, and once he did, Don kind of relaxed and became who he really was. And he loved going to the theater, he loved radio, he loved Charlie McCarthy, and so here in town he spent 50 cents, went and got himself a ventriloquist dummy and became really good at that. And then when he went to high school, he was very popular. He was in like a lot of the drama productions and people just loved him. So once he finished up high school, he decided to go to New York and try and make it as a legitimate actor. Unfortunately, the first audition he went to, the casting director told him he would never make it in any form and he should just give up. And Don basically came back to this town after leaving this triumphant way and, you know, being the big man on campus while he was in high school, came back here and was, as his daughter said, plucking chickens in a local market until he got drafted. And when he got drafted to go into World War II, they actually drafted him into the performing section of the military, and so he actually was a ventriloquist performer for the next 2 years while he was in the military. That's actually kind of funny. While he was performing in the military, he realized that the real draw was the ventriloquist dummy and not him, so he got mad one day and threw it into the ocean, just chucked it overboard and started working on his comedy act. And so when he got out of the military, that's when he went to the University of West Virginia and was studying theater and met who would become his wife, and they ended up getting married and decided to give New York another try. Good thing they did, because they went to New York and he immediately got an agent. He started getting some work. He got a radio show where he was playing a cowboy on a radio show, and that eventually went to TV, so he was making a living starting out with that. And then he ended up getting cast in No Time for Sergeants on Broadway, and Andy Griffith was in that. Andy Griffith heard his voice, came over and said, "Wait a minute, I know you from the cowboy show," and said his character's name, and I think his name was Wendy Wales, and they became fast friends. So once the play was over and they went to make the movie in Los Angeles, Andy Griffith got Don Knotts a part on No Time for Sergeants in the movie as well. They were always best friends. Now, after he made the movie, he came back to New York to his wife and his daughter, and he ended up getting a lot of work. He got like TV and radio work at the same time. He was working 3 different jobs at once and decided that he was just gonna pare it down because he had gotten a job on the Steve Allen Show as a writer and on-camera performer. And so that was what he was putting everything into. And then eventually they ended up moving out to Los Angeles, the whole show, and then the show got canceled. So he had come out to Los Angeles thinking he had work, and he didn't have any work. So he got a couple of movies at 20th Century Fox, and then one day he's watching television and he sees the pilot for the Andy Griffith Show and calls his old pal Andy Griffith and says, "Do you think you need a deputy?" And Andy said, "Call Sheldon Leonard," and Sheldon Leonard had seen Don Knotts doing some of his characters on the Steve Allen Show and said he thought he would be a good fit, and that's how he became Barney Fife. And that is like one of the most timeless shows there is. I mean, you want to talk, it has never been off the air since it started airing in, I believe, 1960 or 61. He was the only performer on the show to ever win a TV Academy Award. He actually won 5 of them. 2 of them as a guest after he left the show. He was on the show for 5 years and then left to make movies. And even when he left, Andy Griffith helped with the Ghost of Mr. Chicken script to help make it funny and everything. He was still involved with him there, but he went off to make movies, and he would still come back and be a guest on the show. And then when they would make the reunion shows, he would participate in that. And even when Andy Griffith had a hit with Matlock, he brought Don on to be a star or a guest star several times on Matlock. I love that his hat says Mayberry. Now we of course have to mention that he was on Three's Company. You gotta love, I mean, Three's Company was already a hit show, and the Ropers were leaving and they needed a new you know, landlord, and here comes Ralph Furley in all of his crazy hip, you know, attire, his colorful clothes. And the thing that I thought was so great about that was that John Ritter said that when they would come up with what he was gonna wear every week, he would not, nobody on the show would know, because he wouldn't wear it even during the dress rehearsals. Nobody would know until they went out to film it in front of a live studio audience. And then a lot of times the costumes that he had were so funny that the cast would start laughing, and then, you know, it would be like a fun experience for the audience. Now, he's not buried here. His entire other family members are buried here, but he's buried in Westwood Cemetery in Los Angeles, and he has just a fantastic headstone. They have just about all of his most memorable characters etched onto the front of the headstone. But he actually, once he started making money, he bought his mom. He was always really close to his mom. He bought his mom a house here in town, and I believe the house is still here. I want to go see if it is. And he would come back and visit, like they said, he would go to reunions, but he would come back and visit her. They liked baseball, and they would watch baseball and talk baseball together and everything. Hard to believe, you know, he seems like such a happy guy and everything when you see him on TV, but to know the kind of life that he grew up with, and that, you know, behind the scenes, like I said, he was a hypochondriac. So that was a problem that both of his wives ran into, is that he, and one of his, I think his son said, he would work 5 days a week filming Andy Griffith, and then the moment the weekend came, he'd either have an earache or a sore, you know, he always imagined he had some health dilemma that would keep him like locked in a room for the whole weekend, and then, you know, when Monday would come, he'd be fine again. And this went on throughout his whole life. When he got married to his second wife, she said somebody accidentally kicked him in the leg at their wedding ceremony, and he was so paranoid he was going to get a blood clot that he canceled going on their honeymoon and gave the tickets to her parents, and they went on the honeymoon, and her and Don went back to Los Angeles. And she said, you know, I just realized then, like, hey, when you marry somebody, that's, you take all that on. And so that was part of their life together, was always him thinking that he was sick or ill or something was wrong with him. And I'm noticing on the people who were donors, that was his last wife, Francie Yarborough Knotts. And she's who I knew. She's who I met at Jerry's, and she was super nice. She couldn't have been more friendly. She really took great care of him. Also see Andy Griffith Rerun Watchers Club. That's great. Now they have a museum here in town. I want to go check it out. And as I was leaving the theater, I noticed this. Look at this plaque. It says at this location, November 14th, 1917, Chief Kennedy gave his life defending the town from destruction by fire. I think the museum is 5 minutes straight down this street, if it's open today. There's the WCLG University of West Virginia radio station. It says William Glasscock of Morgantown, the 13th governor of West Virginia. Kind of looks like one of the people from the beginning of Cheers, doesn't he? It's an interesting plaque. Here's the county courthouse. It's kind of cool. They have the river flowing through there. 1776. That's a very cool fountain. They say history is all around, and they have all this crazy, cool, wacky art of like a walking chocolate chip cookie, and nothing on here of Don Knotts. Alright, here's the Morgantown History Museum. I had read online they have some stuff about Don in there. Let's see if it's open. Look back there in the back. They have an entire section on Don. The Love God. I actually like that movie. It was basically him being Hugh Hefner. He was like a magazine guy that gets a job running a women's magazine, you know. They were trying to bring him into the late 60s. And then of course, The Ghost of Mr. Chicken came from, Andy Griffith said it was when they did an episode of the Andy Griffith Show where they did like a haunted house, and Don said, hey, wouldn't that be a good idea for a movie for me? And then this is the original popcorn machine from the Morgan Theater, one of the places that Don would have seen movies. That's really cool. He would have got his little popcorn out of there. Don borrowed $100 and hitched a ride with some folks who were driving to New York City. Within a few weeks, he appeared on TV and began a career on the radio. There's his birth certificate. Jesse Donald Knotts. Born to Jesse Knotts and Elsie Moore. There he is as the reluctant astronaut. The incredible Mr. Limpet, man who loves fish so much he ends up becoming one. And then take a look at that. There's Don and his ventriloquist dummy. And they were telling me here that actually one of his friends' uncles, I believe, was the one who carved that dummy for him, and that's the one that he threw into the ocean. They were also telling me that one of the ladies that came in and took a tour recently said that her great-grandfather or grandfather was one of the people that ran the Metropolitan Theater in the 30s, and when they would switch out the film reels, that's when Don would get up and do his performance with the ventriloquist dummy. And Bobby Benson's show, that was the radio show that he was doing that Andy Griffith knew him from. He had a character named Wendy Wales, I believe. And it looks like everything in this case and the autographed photos that they have were all from one man's collection. A guy in Southern California collected Don memorabilia his whole life, and when he passed away, he donated it all to this museum. So there's a signed photo and another signed photo, and that's Mr. Furley era RF. That's so cool. And then he even has a Barney Fife era signed photo. Then right here on this, you can see his name right in the middle. Line number 4, Knotts, J. Donald. That was Don's autobiography. He was a very humble guy. Even Ron Howard said he didn't like to talk about himself. He, you know, even though he won all those awards, those 5 Emmys, he'd never talk about it unless somebody else brought it up jokingly. No Time for Sergeants. There is the hometown celebration for Don Knotts Festival t-shirt. And there's a signed picture from Mr. Limpet. Mayberry Sheriff's badge. And Don signed this jacket, you can see right there. Look at what it is. And this was something from his graduation. It looks like it might have been his graduation program. You can see from 1942. And he was class president. Donald Knotts. This is a fan letter response that he apparently made. He wrote this woman Tammy back. 1977. He was apparently a real ladies' man. Like, he didn't cheat on his wives or anything, but women, when he was single, women loved him. So I did know that when the family moved from the farm, they moved here in town and rented a house. I believe his mother only let students and people that were learning glass art be tenants to stay there. It was kind of like a boarding house sometimes. And all the places that he lived are unfortunately gone now. It's a pretty nice little collection. Definitely worth coming in and checking out. And this is pretty cool. They have his award for getting the Star on the Walk of Fame. And it actually says that it was presented to the Met, where Don performed as a teenager, presented by Francie Knotts, Don's wife, Karen Knotts, Don's daughter, and John Piles, Don's good friend. October 2014. This was a fun little stop. I'm really glad I stopped here because she was telling me inside that when Don went to college, he didn't have a lot of money, so he was actually rushed to be in a fraternity, and then he told the guys, I don't have the money to pay to live in the house. But they all liked him so much, they said, we'll make you the head of entertainment and you take care of all the entertainment whenever we do anything, and that will be your payment for living here. And she was also telling me that, for a long time in this town, they didn't think anybody would care about the history, so they didn't really have much about Don Knotts' life here. And then one person decided, hey, maybe we should do a festival and just see, just see if anybody cares. And they said that the festival was so successful, it led to them having this museum. How cool is that? They say history is all around, and they have all this crazy, cool, wacky art of like a walking chocolate chip cookie, and nothing on here of Don Knotts. So we saw the Metropolitan Theater, but they mentioned inside there the Morgan Theater. I'll show you where that was. This building right here, it's now partially Gallery 304. This was the Morgan Theater. When they were changing out the reels, he would pop up on stage with his ventriloquist dummy and perform inside there. The way I know that is because right around the corner there's a photo right here and it says it's the Morgan Theater, and it says look behind you, and I matched up the windows. I'm gonna come out and find Don Knotts Boulevard while we were here, and I found it. Not a bad little town. I kind of thought they would have a mural or something to Don somewhere, and I asked while I was in there, and that's when the conversation started up about how they never really thought anybody would care about the history. That's a cool mural. Those two people dancing up there. I dig that. So this home right here was the last home of Don Knotts' mom, and she fell very ill, ended up in the hospital, and he came back to be with her and was with her until she ended up passing away. I think she was 84 when she died, but this was the house that he had bought for her with his Andy Griffith Show money and all that to make her life easier. As hard of a life as they had, and as much as it was difficult to make ends meet, she always had a great sense of humor, which is kind of where he got it. Well, my friends, we're going to call it a day. I want to thank Scott Memmer for becoming my newest Patreon, helping to support this channel and the adventures. And thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed seeing some of Don Knott's hometown, seeing the amazing statue they put up to memorialize him, and the museum that's trying to help remember him as well. Thank you all for watching. Please hit the like button, please subscribe, and we'll see you all next time. Have a great night, and goodbye.